welcome back to the channel. Hope y'all are doing well. This is one of the last videos of the year, so this one and one more next week, and then that's it. And then I won't see y'all until 2025. And 2025 is gonna be a good year. It is. So today, next week I'm gonna be doing my top 10 reads of the year, so stay tuned for that. But today we're gonna do the end of the year book tag. I have a couple of questions for myself regarding what I've read this year, what I didn't read this year, what I have in terms of goals for next year for myself with my books. And I don't want to take too much of y'all time, so I'm going to get right into the first one. Now, at first, I had best book of the year on here as one of the options. But then I remembered that I'm doing my top 10 next week, and telling y'all the best book of the year would probably spoil that. But what I do have on here is the worst book of the year. And the worst book of the year was definitely hands down Groundbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. It was, not only was it not a good book in my opinion, it also was a big disappointment because I love Victoria Aveyard and I love her Red Queen series. I say it all the time. I've said it I don't know how many times. And I was so excited for a new series from her. Something like, oh my god, brand new. It's gonna be not just like the first one, but it's gonna be, because I'm expecting a lot. And I guess my expectations were probably too high going into that book. But and I had that whole series. I ended up donating all 3 of those books to the library because I was never gonna read them. The first book, it was way too long. I felt like there was a lot that could have been cut out. I felt like it wasn't keeping my attention, and it was so wordy and too much world building and exposition and stuff going on. Like it just was a lot, and it was very, very wordy and just so boring is the only word I have. So definitely worst book of the year hands down was Groundbreaker, unfortunately. Next is my favorite new author that I discovered this year. This is like a 2-parter, so I have like my favorite new author like in Big 5 or something, you don't know what I'm saying, and then my favorite indie author. So first, my favorite author that I discovered is Alexis Henderson. She is, the way she writes just struck a chord with me for some reason, and I've only read that one book, but I guarantee you the other 2 books are getting read for sure in January. Her other books, and I'm really, really excited about those. But reading an Academy for Liars just was so, I was like, oh my gosh, like the way she writes is so atmospheric and it's beautiful and I love it. And definitely Alexis Henderson for sure. My favorite indie author that I discovered this year is Kimberly Brown. There was no contest. I fell in love with her books. I think I read 8 or 9 of her books this year. I read the Giroux Family series. I read Rhythms Blues. I read Perfection of a Moment. I read A Justified Love Affair. I feel like I'm missing some, but I read a lot of her books this year and fell in love with them. So shout out to Kimberly Brown. Like, I still have a long way to go before I make a dent in her catalog, but Kimberly Brown definitely got my favorite indie author spot. Next prompt is, what series did I not finish this year? Or series, multiple, like there are multiple. The first one is The Eisenberg Effect, which is a contemporary romance series by Gray Huffington. I read the first book, Luca, and was not a big fan of it. There was some writing in it that I just did not like. I didn't like the character Luca, so that being my first experience with a Gray Huffington book, it made me not want to pick up another one. But I have every intention of getting out of that series, going to another one, and seeing if it's one, because it got to be something. There's something for everybody, so there has to be something within that catalog that I'm gonna like. So that's the first one. The second one is I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me. Now, while there are only 2 books out, I only got a chance to get to the first one this year, so I haven't read the second book yet. That came out in November, which is I Am the Dark Who Answers When You Call. That Answers When You Call. I can never remember the name of that book, but I think that's it. But I have not finished that series either. I also did not finish The Witchery. Like I said, there's only 2 books in right now. I don't know if there plan to be any more for either series, but I did not get to the Shadow Coven this year after reading The Witchery in October. And this is one that I just talked about, but Groundbreaker, I guess, is also included in that because I read the first book and didn't read any of the other ones because I just was not interested. I feel like I try to stay away from series a lot this year because everything is a series, and sometimes I just want to read one book within a world and not be worried about I gotta go out and get the next one and the next one. A lot of the like romance books I read this year were series, but they are not like continuations necessarily. Some of them were just like set within the same world, same characters, same relationships, that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I had a few that I didn't get to finish that I will try to get to finish next year. Next is what book caught me completely off guard. I had two answers for this. I had a hard time picking because they're both for different reasons. So the first one from earlier in the year is Perfect Peace, and Perfect Peace surprised me because of the plot. Like even after reading like this little bit of the summary and a quote from the back of the book, I still was not like completely mentally prepared for the stress and anxiety of that book. Perfect Peace revolves around a family, woman. It's an African American family, and the woman, she has all boys. She's always wanted a girl. She's pregnant again. She ends up having another boy, but she makes the midwife promise not to tell anyone that she's gonna raise this child as a girl because she's always wanted a girl. So no one's allowed to be in the room with her if she's changing her clothes. No one else but her can be around if she's changing her clothes. Like it's, and then it gets into the implications of what happens when you raise a child like that and then rip the rug out from under them and tell them the truth when they're so used to one thing, and then you just, it completely flip things on the head. It's a very, very good book, very emotional, but I still think it's something that everybody should read. Perfect Peace is such a good book, such a good read, very, very surprising plot-wise. The other book that was surprising for a completely different reason is The Foxglove King by Hannah Winton. This one was surprising because I didn't think that I would ever like anything Hannah Winton ever wrote. I've told this story before, so I'll just make it really quick. I read her Wilderwood series, which is For the Wolf and For the Throne, and was not super impressed, was not excited, was not like checking for it. It was just, you know, it was hard to read. A lot of stuff was not making any sense. A lot of the plot and world building was not making any sense. So when I saw that these books were coming out, I was skeptical, of course, haven't read the other ones, and trying to get all the things checked off on my Kindle. I was like, I'll just go ahead and read this because it's on the list, and if I read this, then I'll get the achievement. And I ended up loving it. So that shocked me because of the author. So good on you, Hannah Winton, for changing my mind. Okay, this next one was really hard too, but this one is, what was my favorite romance of the year? Now, what I can do is break down my favorite book into two categories. So like, I read a lot of romance, I read a lot of fantasy. So I'll break it down to what was my favorite romance book and then what was my favorite fantasy book. And that still doesn't necessarily give anything away for next week. But the romance, I had three. I had Hookshot by Kennedy Ryan, I had Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop, and I had 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. And I had a really, really hard time choosing between the three because I love all of them for different reasons. Natasha Bishop's book is like juicy drama, like we're only gonna do this for the week while we're here on vacation, and he falls first tropes and all of that kind. It's so good. It's great. I mean, I have three copies of the book for a reason. Like, I love it so much, and I also just love Natasha Bishop. 7 Days in June gave me my like second chance romance like thing that I love. It's my favorite thing, romance. I just newly discovered how much I love Tia Williams. I just started reading her books this year for the first time, so it just, that one just was, I love the premise of it. I love the back and forth of like going back to the past week that they had and then the current week with them reconnecting. Thought it was great. Hookshot was, at first I thought just recency bias. That's why I was saying it was my favorite book in the Hoop series, but as I sat with it, I realized no, Hookshot is definitely my favorite book in that series. The characters were a lot more I guess real is the best word I can think of it. Something that seemed a lot more grounded in reality, I guess. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I like those characters a lot more, so it was hard to pick just one because I love them all so much for different reasons. But at the end of the day, I chose Hookshot by Kennedy Ryan as my favorite romance of the year. It just, I love the love interest. Keenan is great, and Lotus, she's dealing with some things, and it's very interesting to see how she is processing those things, and how, from knowing her from previous books, how she was to seeing how she starts to change and get help for herself in this book, since it's surrounding her and her trauma, and how Keenan is so patient with her, and he's also going through his own things on his side. So it was just a really good story, really good book. I loved it, and I love Kennedy Ryan. My favorite fantasy book of the year, well, my favorite fantasy book of the year comes from the beginning of this year, which is Destroy the Day. It's the last book in the Divine Night series by Bridget Kemmerer. I was looking through my Storygraph, and I realized that I didn't give a lot of like fantasies 5 stars this year. I don't know if it just wasn't a good fantasy year for me, or if I'm just trying to be a little bit more realistic with how I rate things now. But I definitely read a lot more romance than fantasy according to my Storygraph. And I think that, I don't know, I don't want to say that affected how I started rating fantasy, but I just didn't get to read a lot of fantasy. And the fantasy that I did read this year, it was like mid to okay. There was nothing that was like, only had, I think, like 2 or 3 books that like really jumped out at me as far as fantasy goes, and one of them was Destroy the Day. And that series definitely grew on me as well. It started off kind of slow, and by the time we got to the last book, I loved it. I loved all the different perspectives. I love seeing how everyone is separated, and we see how everybody is formulating a plan to come back together to fix everything that's been broken. It just is a really good story. I recommend that series. I recommend anything Bridget Kemmerer has written as far as fantasy goes. All her books are great. Book Boyfriend of the Year, it goes to Keenan from Hookshot. I mean, I just gushed about him like a few minutes ago. And like I say, very patient, very understanding, and attentive, intentional, loves Miles Davis. I mean, he was great. And he was great for Lotus as well, considering, like I said, what she was going through. He was very patient with her and waiting for her to feel like she was ready for him before, instead of just like pushing her and pressuring her to do, you know, what he wanted when she clearly isn't ready. So shout out to Keenan. He's great. I think he dethroned Rome, because for the longest time Rome from Only for the Week was at the top, and that was in the beginning of the year. Channing from Rhythms Blues also was in the top 3 for this year. So that's my top 3. I think it would go Keenan, Channing, Rome. So it was a good year for both boyfriends. Definitely a good year for them. What I didn't get to, it's a lot, so I'm just gonna read them off. I had to write them down in my handy dandy notebook so I didn't forget. So let's just go ahead and go through them. Rage of Dragons, Dangerous Ones, A Crown of Ivy and Glass, Akatar, Black Shield Maiden, Forged in Blood, Dune, Way of Kings, Fall That Saved Us, Kingmaker. I can go on. I can definitely go on. There are a lot of books this year that I did not get to, that I did not get to read. I already mentioned I didn't get to read Shadow Coven. I didn't get to read I Am the Dark, The Answers When You Call. I didn't get to read any of my books for my Reading Black Classics series. But, you know, I'm going to try to keep myself on a better schedule, or a different kind of reading schedule. I have to have specific books assigned. I'll get to this all later, but I'm gonna have to have specific books assigned for the months. So yeah, there's a lot of books that I didn't get to, for sure, but you can never get to everything. It's always something always happens. So okay, book club book of the year. So if you did not know, I co-run a book club with my friend Kay over on Fable. It's called Endless Amount of Books. You can click the link in my bio, or just go to Fable and search for the name of the book club, which is Endless Amount of Books, and you'll find it. And there were a few books that we read that I was like, but then there were a few that I just absolutely love. And I narrowed it down to 2 books, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and give this one to Immortal Dark by Tigis Germa. That, we don't get a lot of like black vampire stuff, especially not the way that she did it, and it was just So good. It was a highly anticipated book. Did not disappoint at all. It had a great protagonist, morally gray, Dan, very morally gray character. Susunyos, her vampire, is very it was a good foil for her. I'm not gonna give too much away if you want to read it, and I highly recommend it. But yeah, he was great too. A lot of great side characters that deserve all the love and protection of everyone. And yeah, the side characters were actually really, really good. It's very rare that I like all of the side characters. It's usually a couple that I don't like you, but all of them, I love them all. So definitely give it to Immortal Dark with An Academy for Liars as a very, very close second. Okay, books I DNF'd. There were only 2. Well, there were 3. So the first one I'm going to mention, and I hope I didn't write it down, but it just popped into my head. I had an arc for the Village Library Demon Hunting Society or whatever. I think that's what it was called. And I tried so hard to get through that book, but every time I picked it up to read it, I found myself falling asleep. So there was no way I was going to be able to finish that book. It was just not holding my attention at all. I think I got maybe 15 or 16% into that book, maybe a little more, and I just was like, okay, I give up. This is not going to work. So that was the first one. The second book I DNF'd was Dragonfall. Now, I'm not going to say I DNF'd it and won't go back to it. I might. It's just that in November, when I was reading this after I started reading this after I finished Blood at the Root, and I was getting through it so slowly because it just like the first book, it was not keeping my attention. So I just was like, you know what? I'm going to put this down, leave it, whatever page I'm on, and come back to it at the end of the month if I have time. Because if I stay reading this book, I'm not going to get to anything else. It's just going to take up all of my time. So I didn't finish it, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know. It just wasn't doing it for me, but maybe I just need to get further into it. And the last book that I DNF'd was a book club book, which I try not to do, but this one I just couldn't help it. And that was The Final Strife. First of all, The Final Strife is about, I don't know if y'all can see that. Can y'all see? The Final Strife is about yay thick, like that. It's thicker than this Order of the Phoenix. I don't have anything else, I don't think, around here. Thicker than Order of the Phoenix. It's thicker than Breaking Dawn, because Breaking Dawn is pretty thick. It's a big book, and just once again not capturing my attention at all. I couldn't. I don't know. I wasn't the only one, I don't think, but I think some people went back and tried to finish it later. But I wasn't the only one that it wasn't keeping my attention. I don't think anybody was interested in that book, unfortunately. But we'll see. I still hear good things. Maybe it just wasn't for me. Maybe I need to get it on my Kindle because it'll be easier to read, and I will be looking at the length of it. But we'll see. And the last thing on my list is what are my goals for next year. Specifically for this channel and books in general, first goal is how many books am I going to read. I'm going to try to do 80. I could have done past 80 this year if I didn't mess up back in April and only read 1 book, but I had a lot going on back then, so I couldn't really read as much as I wanted to. So I just want to get further on the goal. Usually by now I've surpassed my goal, and at this point, as of this recording, I'm still 3 books away from my goal. So I don't have a lot of time to finish, but it'll get done. I'm not worried about it. I'll finish 1 book today, and then I got 2 more. So yeah, the goal is definitely 80 books for next year. Hopefully passing 80 books, and more nonfiction books also is something that I want to try to do. This year I was also supposed to do more manga, but I did not read any manga this year, none. So that needs to be something that I get into next year as well. The next thing, as far as, I don't like to make, I try not to make sub goals. I made that 100 sub goal for myself. that was supposed to be like for the year, and that, like, as of record, I keep saying as of recording this, I'm at 280, so I well surpassed my goal. So thank y'all so much for subscribing and for liking my content. I really appreciate it. So I'm gonna try to put together another subscriber goal. I don't know what that is yet because I don't want to be too ambitious and set myself up for disappointment. Not necessarily failure, but set myself up for disappointment. So I have to figure out what that is, but I had to set a subscriber goal, and my first thought is 500, which is, I think, as long as I stay consistent, is doable. And the last thing is to just, like I said, stay consistent with uploading, keep myself on a schedule, put myself on a better schedule for recording, so I don't feel like I'm recording at the last second and then having to record and edit and upload a video all in the same morning before I gotta, you know, get rest for work. So I want to do that. I also want to start uploading twice a week instead of once a week. I don't know. That's why I said I need to put myself on some kind of recording schedule to make sure I get everything out that I need to get out, because I want to start doing my series, my Harry Potter reread series. I want to start doing my Black classic series. I want to do my Twisted Tales series. I have a lot of series that I want to do, and I want to start doing reading vlogs and stuff like that, or live reading sprints. So I have a lot of things that I want to do as far as more content. So that's another one of my goals, is get more content up on the channel. Well, that is the end of my end of the year book tag. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like the video and subscribe, turn on notifications so you know when I upload, and I'll see you guys next week for the last video of 2024.